Okay, well hello, greetings. Welcome to the Philosophy Club here in Little Batet, in the middle of ancient Gaul. There's been a new archaeological discovery of someone, they call him a Celtic prince, buried in a site in Champagne, northeast France. They used to bury them with their own chariots, all intact. And these would have been overseen by druids who would have done the rituals for the funerals. And they believed in the god of wheels, Tyrannus, who keeps chariots on the road. And it's quite interesting. So the wheel was a very important symbol for the Celts and the druids. And I knew the Archdruid of Avebury, who died not that long ago. He was a great biker. So, I think the love of bikes in modern Europe is going right back to the Druid thing and their chariots. But it'd be cool to be buried with one's chariot. Okay, so look, hello, welcome. It's been quite a week, actually, since we last met. It feels like it's been a year, but lots been happening in the world. I just want to comment on a few things. Most importantly today, finally, the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel in Gaza has kicked in. And they are releasing hostages as we speak on both sides. They've reached an agreement mediated by apparently Biden, Trump behind the scenes. Everyone got involved, the Emir of Qatar. Why this wasn't done months ago is just beyond me. It's just common sense that this should have been done. And if we had a Nonagon, if we had a Department of Peace Building in the US, that's what they would have been working on full time. And we should have one in Britain and in Israel, and in other countries. But anyway, better late than never. I also want to see a ceasefire over Ukraine and Russia. That's also long overdue. We should focus on that now. And I did attend a meeting this week of the Massachusetts Peace Action, which is a peace activist group in Massachusetts. And I heard a brilliant talk by a professor of politics in the University of Rhode Island, who is himself Russian-American, Professor Nikolai Petrov. And he ended his brilliant talk by saying we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Russia and Ukraine because they're not talking to each other. We have to get them talking to each other and comparing narratives, because this guy, Nikolai, knows both sides. He's spoken to senior intellectuals, peacemakers, and policymakers in both Russia and Ukraine. And he said rightfully they're talking completely different languages and they have their own history of suffering. Well, that's what a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is for, is to get them talking. So I hope that I'll be able to work with him and other colleagues to set that up. It's now on the top of my agenda. So that's one good thing I've done. And the other thing I want to say is I'm writing a new edition of this paper, North American, Native American Cultures, which was published way back in 1999 in the International Encyclopedia of Applied Ethics, which is a major 5-volume work that all academic libraries have. And I was teaching at the University of London on primal religions, so I became a quite well-known figure who was specialising in the green boxes, because at that time nobody was really interested in indigenous spirituality and religion. And I made it my business to really, find out and study it. And I was into the Druids already and the pagans. And then I went to Rome. I went to this interfaith conference in the mid-90s. And there were Native American spiritual elders there in the Vatican, as well as Shintos and Jains. So what I did is I wrote this paper, which I think is one of the best things I've written. It's 35 pages. It could be a book. And there's a third edition of this encyclopedia coming out, which I've been asked to upgrade the paper. Last time I did this, they cut loads out, which was sad because You know, so I'm hoping I can smuggle in a whole load of new information that's been discovered about North American and Middle and South American culture and religion since then. And one of the most interesting things I want to share is the discovery. The discovery is detailed in this important book, which everyone should read, by David Graeber and David Wengrow, A New History of Humanity, The Dawn of Everything. And it is largely drawn, actually, on American Indian anthropological research, how sophisticated these cultures were. They weren't technologically, you know, very sophisticated. They didn't have airplanes. They didn't even have, you know, much writing, except in Mesoamerica. But they were socially very sophisticated. And I've been studying this place called Poverty Point, which is in Louisiana, in the Mississippi Basin area, which was incredibly sophisticated culturally. And I did study anthropology at the University of Calgary, and got very interested in it. And what I think they've discovered, and what Graeber and Wengrow argue, is that these tribes were very sophisticated in their cultural wealth. They obviously had advanced spiritual and ethical concepts, and they weren't technically sophisticated, but they had, for instance, they had a clan system studied by Elizabeth Tucker, who's the Dean of Iroquois Studies, which interests me. And she found that there's you can join the brotherhood or the clan grouped around a particular animal, usually, like the eagle clan or the bear clan or the wolf clan. And these were in place throughout North America. And if you ended up in some, you know, 1,000 miles from your home tribe area, and you said, I'm a member of the eagle clan, they would honour you and give you hospitality and look after you. The clan system was Pan-American, it seems. And that's incredibly sophisticated. How was that possible? So they're studying that. And it's extremely, you know, interesting. I'm sure the Druids and the pagans of the Slavic world and, you know, Estonia and Finland, they all had a similar kind of clan system. But so a lot of cultural richness, and I'm now putting all that as much as I can smuggle into my revamped paper for this encyclopedia. The other thing to say is that the Delphic Academy, we're going to be meeting on February the 6th, so put that in your diary. February the 6th will be the meeting of the International Delphic Academy, and we're going to dedicate it to the tragedy that's happened in Los Angeles, which is an apex centre for world art, culture, especially film, but there's also other creative, you know, art happening in Los Angeles region. And so the Delphic Academy, I want us to look at, maybe we can organise a Delphic Games there. It's supposed to host the Olympic Games in 2028, but will it be able to? You know, we don't know. Los Angeles might not be able to actually host Olympic Games. So, hello, Bishy, very nice of you to join us, my dear. Why don't you go and sit on the lap there and keep warm? There you are. Just sit there and calm down. Okay, I don't want you getting burned by the candle. So, yes, I think I'm definitely a member of the Cat Clan. So anyway, so that's what we're doing, and I'm going to be alternating events each month on focusing on the arts piece through the Delphic Academy, and then the other month we'll do intellectuals and philosophers. I think I'm going to wear my hat as a poet once a month and invite artists, poets, you know, writers to join, filmmakers to show some clips of their stuff, because I think the arts transcend the kind of intellectual clashes that go on and that create polarization. I mean, there are brilliant poets and artists and dancers and musicians in Russia and in Ukraine, So I'm going to be inviting them both to come and take part in the Delphic Academy's work, which is based on the old Delphic games that took place which was regarded as the centre of the world, Delphi, in the classical world. So, so that's exciting. And the other thing I want to say, yes, I'm watching a brilliant film, Notre Dame de Paris, an old film, classic. Anthony Quinn plays Quasimodo, who's the hunchback of Notre Dame, falls in love with the beautiful Italian Gina Lollobrigida. And it's just such a beautiful old film. They don't make films like this anymore. It was an Italian-French co-production back in '56. It was the first ever Technicolor film of Victor Hugo's novel. And it's just one of those old-fashioned classics. And that's why I'm so sad about what's happened in Los Angeles. The film industry represents so much about world history. If all that goes up in smoke, it's just better get Notre Dame's bells ringing because it's tragic. Talking of which, the other thing I want to share about film is I've been looking at Louisiana and the Mississippi Basin and the tribes there. It led me to look at Mark Twain. I've never taken Mark Twain seriously. I mean, it's not my kind of thing, but I'm going to revisit Mark Twain. I've discovered several things about him, that he really did know the Mississippi backwards. He trained as a pilot on the steamboats, and you had to pass a test, a bit like a London taxi driver, because you had to know where all the pitfalls were, the shoals, the banks, so you could steer these steamboats up and down 1,000 miles of Mississippi. And his nickname, his nom de plume, Mark Twain, apparently comes from a cry that they used to do on the steamboats. Mark Twain means there's 2 fathoms beneath the boat, it's safe. There's a mark of 2 fathoms Twain. And he used to have to cry that, the guy on duty. If it went below that, then you would steer for the middle of the river. And I didn't know that before, so I'm going to study more because he wrote some brilliant books based on his life on the Mississippi. And he became actually an activist for anti-imperialism in American history. He didn't agree with America becoming an imperial power and going off capturing the Philippines and Cuba and taking over Spanish territories and things. He said no, enough of that. He was a liberal politically. And anyway, long story, he was good friends with Tesla, the great inventor. They were always chumming. He was also good friends with Thomas Edison, who'd invented, based on the Lumiere brothers' work, cinema. And he came and he filmed Mark Twain just 1 year before his death in 1907. And I've been watching this film with Mark Twain with his great moustache and his daughters having tea on the terrace and smoking his cigars, which he did right to the end. So a real character kept alive by a film. So how much, we should. That's why I'm doing this homage to Hollywood and to the film industry of Los Angeles on the 6th of February. And then the other thing I want to say is that you've heard me going on about the 99 Names of Peace here in this philosophy club. Well, the books have arrived. 2 volumes. This is so exciting. They arrived by post. It took me 2 weeks to typeset them and get them printed correctly. But they've arrived and they're brilliant. I love them. This is a sort of Wheel of Peace names that's on the first volume, and then the second volume has got a slightly different variation of the same thing. And I thought we'd start our philosophy club something slightly different. There's 99 names apiece. So if you want to choose a number between 1 and 99, I'll just summarise what that project is in that language. So both of you choose a number, and over the weeks we can go through them, discover.
I've already chosen 22.
22 you want? Okay, let me have a sip of this. Right. Now, so 22, right. Excellent. This is a great choice, actually. Some are sort of lightweight, some are heavyweight projects. This one is probably one of the most important, although it seems only a small thing. The language first is Avestan, which is the old Iranian oldest language, and it was spoken by Zoroaster, one of the first prophets in world religions, who lived about 1700 BC, and who's on the periodic table. Could you pass me one of them? In the Persian ones, Zoroastrianism is one of these. And then the offshoots of that include the Manichaean tradition and Zervanism and others. So there's a cluster inspired by Persian religion. Zoroaster was quite an amazing teacher. Anyway, the language is fascinating. And in this chapter, which is chapter 22, I explore the history of the Zoroastrian language and, what it means and what its words for peace are. Akshti, which means both peace as such and the contract of peace. It appears in Avestan texts. Akshti was called the goddess of peace in Avestan hymns and poems. And she was also paired with the idea of victorious, the idea of a deity that is also victorious, and also it meant victory. So peace comes with victory. That's one way of getting peace. But of course the problem with that is then you have to go and conquer everybody. Well, the Jains have worked out that the highest form of victory is over oneself and over one's ego. So if that kind of victory is what's meant, then we get universal Akshti. And she's also connected to Asha, which is their word for truth. It's another parallel term for peace, through truth. And in fact, it's really important in the Zoroastrian religion. The texts say that the beginning of the world was, everything was fine at Garden of Eden. God wanted this world to be perfect, created us perfect, men and women, animals, everyone happy. But then the devil appeared, who's called Angramenyu, and he invented the lie. He invented lying, or druj, deceit, in Avestan. And ever since, druj, or deceit, has been causing trouble for mankind. Whenever druj is about, Angramenyu is operative. And Zoroaster warned about this. He said we have to be on our guard against Angramenyu and the lie. Well, it seems to me we've got Angramenyu on steroids at the moment in world politics, because the internet, which is supposed to be invented as a tool for the dissemination of wisdom and enlightenment and love, has become a tool for the dissemination of lies, and we no longer know what's true or what's false. So this is we're at a crisis point. Angramenyu's taken the planet, basically, if we're not careful. And this is the point at which Zoroaster predicted there'd be a new Messiah figure come, the Saoshyant, who would ensure the victory of Asha and Akshti and truth. And that was the seed idea that gave birth to the concept of the Christ, because it was esoteric Zoroastrian devotees who seeded that idea among Kabbalistic Jews, Enochian Jews, and in the circle that gave birth to Christ, Jesus, who his followers definitely believed he was this Saoshyant. It's called the Saoshyant. That's the Avestan term for the Messiah, the Saviour. So, and that's why I think the three Magi came to honour the baby Jesus. We don't know the history of how they knew, but there was something interesting going on behind the scenes in the esoteric brotherhoods and sisterhoods. So anyway, that's all explained in detail in this chapter 22. Do read it. And there's Mithras was the god of Zoroastrianism who ensures the victory of the Saoshyant and of truth. And he became the most popular deity even in the Roman army towards the end of its time, all the soldiers did initiations to Mithras, which was the origin, it's thought, of Freemasonry, or one of the sources, because you swear oaths to follow truth. So all that's absolutely fascinating. That's the language, right? Now, what project goes with that? Well, I didn't have to think very long and hard, because I've been working on this project for the last few years. It's called the Parliamentary Veracity Oath. And the idea is, it started out in Britain, because I ran 33 meetings in the House of Lords with friends, colleagues who were members of the House of Lords. And we would go there and meet once a month when I lived in London. And even after I moved to the Cotswolds, I kept going with this. I'd go into London, co-chair the meeting with a lord, usually Lord Ennals, who was a Labour peer, a really lovely man. His brother founded Amnesty International. And David Ennals was, a great man and a close friend of mine. He also helped run the Gandhi Foundation, which I became the educational director of. So anyway, in those days, did all these meetings in the House of Lords. But it occurred to me that as time went on and I was watching what these Lords and MPs were up to, I realised that some of them don't understand the importance of truth. It occurred to me that some of these politicians, actually lie and get away with it. They're dishonest when you ask them questions, even. And when it came to Brexit and the Tory party seizing power and implementing, I watched Johnson and his cabinet just perfect the art of political lying. I mean, I don't think a true word ever came out of his mouth during his entire premiership. And the same with, the other Tory kind of premiers. I think David Cameron knew the difference between lying and truth, but he was too weak. He didn't know how to stand up against the floodgates that he'd opened up. So anyway, at that time, I had this brainwave, I don't know where from, Mithras maybe, saying, Thomas, what we need is a parliamentary truth oath. All parliamentarians, MPs and Lords, have to swear to tell the truth in any answer, written or spoken, on the floor of Parliament. And if they are found to have lied deliberately, they lose their seat immediately. They're sacked. As a teacher, I was subject, because I trained as a teacher at this time, to incredible disciplinary codes. You had to be squeaky clean in your behaviour, and if you lied or cheated, you'd be thrown out of the profession. The same with a medical doctor. If a medical doctor willingly gives a false diagnosis or gives somebody injections knowing it'll kill them, that's the end of their career as a doctor. And yet that's what politicians are doing and getting away with. There's no checks on their ethical propriety or their truth veracity. And it's the same in other countries. In the American Congress, when you look at some of what they're saying, in Russian Duma, tragically, it's supposed to be a democracy, but they're again not held to the truth. So this project is to bring in a parliamentary veracity oath in all world parliaments, starting with the UK. And I wrote the bill, it's published on my blog, I've reproduced it in the book, and there's a certain language that you follow in the British Parliament. Be it enacted by the Lords, spiritual and temporal, and by the Commons here assembled, that a new bill be brought forward concerning the veracity of members of Parliament and holders of public office bill. And then, it goes into the clauses. And it's not only for members of Parliament, I extended it to judges and senior policemen and other people, holders of public office. Anyway, so that's the project, number 22. And that's a good choice to kick us off. Yeah, thank you very much. So that's one of the 99 names apiece, which is truth, basically. Okay, what one are you going to go for?
45.
45?
Yes.
Ah. Okay.
Because the 45 square 45 is 2025.
Which is this year?
Yes.
Oh, right. So it's a magic number. 45. Excellent. Right, so that's an interesting choice. So it's page 495. And the language is the Filipino language, spoken in the Philippines. The word for peace is kapa. And I had the great honour to visit the Philippines. In 2006, there was a conference organised by the heads of universities. It was called the International Association of University Presidents. And I knew the chairman of that body. So it's something that you belong to if you're the head of a university somewhere in the world. It had several hundred members. And they got a project going with the UN Department of Disarmament Affairs to advance peace studies in all universities worldwide, to up the status of peace, which the UN wants to do, but so does the universities of the world. And I was kind of the representative from the University of London. So they flew me out to the Philippines to this conference. I'd never been to the Philippines before. It's absolutely amazing. I went to the museum in Manila, which tells the whole story of the island, and it's been settled by the Spanish since the 1500s. They founded a university in Manila, which is the oldest Western university in the whole of the Pacific or Asian region. And we went round it. I went to the monument in honour of Jose Rizal, who was the founder of modern Philippines. I'd never heard of him. They have his library reconstructed in his study, basically, his desk and all that stuff. And he was an intellectual. He was a campaigner for Filipino independence from Spain. In the 1890s, they decided enough was enough. Spain had been there 400 years. Time to go, guys. We want our country back. And he was a poet, philosopher, a medical doctor, a Freemason, and an all-round intellectual. He was initiated into a Masonic lodge in Madrid in Spain, where he travelled. And he was a man of non-violence. He didn't say, let's have a violent revolution against the Spanish. He said, no, let's affirm our culture. And let's, graciously let the Spaniards go. We're old enough to stand on our own. But the Spanish didn't like it. They accused him of fomenting, revolt. They locked him up in a prison. And I went to the place, it's now a museum. He was marched out at dawn to a wall and shot by the Spaniards. But it was their worst mistake. He'd been keeping a lid on the whole thing. But when they shot him, then the rebels took off in the hills and started a revolution against the Spanish. It was a typical error by a colonial power. And it led, however, contrary to Mark Twain's desire, led to the intervention of America. Because what happened was, America sent a fleet and said to the Spanish in Manila, well, okay, we'll take over from here. We'll take over the Philippines. and you can go now, And so began the kind of the American presence in the Philippines, which lasted right up until the Japanese conquered the Philippines during World War II. So I had some real interesting learning experiences going to the Philippines. In the chapel of the university, I think De La Salle University, the Japanese rounded up a load of Christian monks and priests and nuns and killed them all during the war as they were being forced out because MacArthur had landed and they knew they were going to lose Manila. They thought, we'll just kill a few with us. And that's another example of the brutality of war. I was told on the visit that the blood by the altar had never been able to be washed off. It's still there as a stain in the stones. Why on earth would one kill, non-violent Christians just because they were Christian, I suppose? Well, that's not my understanding of what either Shintoism or Buddhism should be about. So it gave me a lot of food for thought. And the conference brought together university academics like me from all over the world to discuss peace studies and what we can do to advance that. And the Philippines, you know, has a few centres for this stuff, but never enough. There are very few centres for peace studies in the entire Middle East in the university system. So anyway, so that's the language, and it's fascinating. It's a mixture. It's an Austronesian language, Filipino. It's called Tagalog in their native language. And I, of course, being what I am, I've got dictionaries of Tagalog and brought them home. And it was an oral tradition. Storytelling is at the heart of Filipino culture. And we saw some dances on one of the evenings. They put on a sort of cultural, folkloric Filipino dancing, which is fascinating to watch. And so in the book I give the words for all different words like truth, justice, law. Batas is law. Love, pag-ibig. Heart, puso. To pray is magdasal or mangaral. Reason is katwiran. Truth, katatohanan. I love the sound of words, and I want to know the etymology of these words and the links to other Austronesian languages. Kappa, peace, seems to be related to kapalagayang loob, meaning someone who is at ease with the inside. A friend. So this piece is the situation arising between people who trust each other and are both at ease with their inside. It's a very interesting, you know, reflection in the language. So what's the project to do with this? Okay, I'm very humble here. I just want a peace studies department in every university in the world. I think peace is so important, and academia could do so much. If we had peace studies departments in all the universities, we could crack this thing about what is peace, because we know what it isn't, and that's war and revenge and violence and killing. Until we crack the secret of peace, we're not going to get solutions to global warming and other things, because the military is the biggest contributor, taking all things into consideration. And it's the military intelligence that has given us the lies of the internet. It's a military intelligence dark arts project. And I think it's time for academics to reclaim the right to speak the truth. That's our duty as academics. And so the project is a proposal that we get the university systems of the world, like this International Association of University Presidents that I worked with, but also things like the Association of Commonwealth Universities. That's every university in 53 nations, the Commonwealth, belongs to this thing. So if we got them all to say, yes, we want a peace studies department in them all, then, you know, we could get home and dry. And there's the International Association of Catholic Universities. I know the coordinator for that in Africa, who's on my team. There's a Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, the Spanish-speaking, including in the Philippines. So I don't think it's impossible to do this. And where's the money going to come from? Well, you know, universities depend on a mixture of grants and core funding from governments and you know, other sources. So I think we can find the funding for it. And I'm delighted to see that my Palestinian friend, Mazin Kumsieh, who is connected with the Bethlehem